I gave 30 years to Westfield Manufacturing. 30 years of clocking in before sunrise, pulling overtime when the line jammed, showing up sick if I could still stand, and missing a shift only when my body finally forced me to stop pretending I was made of steel. So when they threw my retirement celebration in the main conference hall, I thought I'd earned the right to breathe. The room was packed. People from every department, even men I'd trained 20 years ago. The facility director showed up. Folks from accounting I'd barely spoken to smiled like we'd shared a lifetime. My brother Greg came with his wife. A few neighbors stopped by. Someone ordered a massive sheet cake with my name written in blue frosting and a banner stretched across the wall. Happy retirement, Marissa. I was standing near the refreshments talking with Blake from logistics about his new pickup truck when I saw him. My husband of 26 years, Vance, walking through the entrance like he wasn't entering a party, but a courtroom. He wore the dark suit he saved for funerals and serious events. In his hands, a manila folder clutched so tight his knuckles looked pale. His face wasn't tearful, it wasn't even angry. It was focused, determined, like someone who'd rehearsed the moment in front of a mirror until it didn't shake anymore. He didn't greet anyone, didn't smile, didn't wave. He walked straight through the crowd as conversations bent around him, the way air splits around a blade. When he stopped 3 feet in front of me, the music and laughter behind us suddenly felt far away. "What's that?" I asked, still trying to make it normal, still trying to believe I was misreading the weight in his posture. He lifted the folder slightly, just enough for me to see it was thick with paperwork. "Divorce papers," he said, loud enough that Blake stopped mid-sentence, loud enough that the room began to quiet in ripples. I looked at the folder, then at my husband's eyes, steady, almost clinical. "You're serving me divorce papers at my retirement party?" My voice didn't sound like mine. "I am." He held the folder out like a final verdict. "Everything's filled out. You just need to sign." And in that silence, dozens of people staring, someone's phone already raised, I realized my life had just been cracked open in public. But what they didn't know was that Vance had absolutely no clue what he'd just done to himself. I'm Marissa Castellano, 53 years old. The kind of woman people describe as steady when they don't know what else to say, because steady sounds like a compliment, even when it really means she carries everything quietly. For 3 decades, Westfield Manufacturing was my second home. Not the glamorous kind of career people post online with captions about passion and purpose, just honest work, hard work, work that smelled like machine oil and hot metal and the stale coffee that lived in every break room thermos. I learned to fix problems before they became disasters. I learned how to speak to men who didn't like taking orders from a woman and still get the job done without raising my voice. And I learned how to come home after 10, sometimes 12 hours, and keep my face calm so my children wouldn't feel the weight of how exhausted I truly was. Vance and I met when I was 26. It was a summer barbecue at a friend's place. Plastic chairs, cheap beer, somebody's kid screaming in the backyard. I remember thinking I wouldn't stay long. I had a shift the next morning. But he was there, leaning against the fence with that easy smile, offering to refill people's cups like he enjoyed being needed. He told me he liked women who knew what they wanted. I told him, half joking, "Then you should probably run." He laughed like he loved that answer. When we started dating, it was simple in the beginning. Movie nights, diner breakfasts, long drives with the windows down and his hand resting on my knee like I was something precious, something worth anchoring himself to. He said he loved my discipline, my work ethic, the way I didn't play games. I believed him. We married young enough to still think love could solve everything. And for a while, it did. In the ways love can. We had Lindsay first, then Derek. 2 kids who grew fast, ate everything in sight, and filled the house with noise that made me tired in the best way. Vance worked too, but not like I did. He drifted between jobs. Some good months, some thin ones. Somehow I became the one who handled the bills because you're just better at that stuff. So I did. I deposited my paycheck, paid the mortgage, paid the insurance, paid the taxes, built the college funds, planned around emergencies before they happened. I didn't do it because I wanted control. I did it because nobody else was doing it. And Vance became the man who liked the idea of being a husband more than the responsibility of being one. Over the years, he started treating my stability like it was his safety net. Like no matter what he didn't do, I would do enough for both of us. He liked to talk about freedom, about finally living, about how once I retired, we'd travel, we'd breathe, we'd start over. But the truth was, I didn't hear partnership in his voice. I heard entitlement. And then there was his sister, Rachel. Rachel had always been loud in the way some people are loud when they're insecure. She liked to make little comments dressed up as jokes. "Marissa works so much," she'd say at family dinners. "Must be nice to never have to be home." Or, "Vance is such a patient man. Not every husband could handle a wife who's married to her job." I used to smile through it. I used to think, don't give it power. But over time, I noticed something. Rachel's opinions didn't just exist in the air. They lived inside Vance. Because slowly, my husband began repeating her language back to me. Soft at first, like he was only borrowing it. "You've changed," he'd say. Or, "You don't even seem happy anymore." And I'd stand there in the kitchen with my hands in dishwater, wondering when my exhaustion started being treated like a moral failure. The signs were small, always small. A longer pause before he answered where he'd been. A new protectiveness over his phone. The way he'd watch me like he was measuring what I'd tolerate. And I didn't want to see it. Because when you've spent your life building something, work, marriage, family, you don't want to believe one person can walk in with a folder and try to erase it. But looking back now, the retirement party wasn't the beginning. It was just the moment he finally decided to stop pretending. The weeks leading up to my retirement didn't feel celebratory. They felt tense, like a room where the windows were closed too long and nobody wanted to admit the air was stale. Vance started hovering in ways he never had before, asking questions that sounded casual but landed wrong. "So, when exactly does your pension kick in?" Or, "That savings account, how much is actually in there now?" He'd say it with a light tone, eyes not quite meeting mine, like he was just curious, like this wasn't information he was mentally filing away. I told myself I was imagining it. After all, we'd been married for 26 years. If I couldn't trust my own husband, who could I trust? Rachel started calling more too. Not to me, never to me, but to Vance. I'd hear her voice through the phone late at night, sharp and animated, while I folded laundry or rinsed dishes. When I asked what she wanted, he'd shrug. "Just checking in." But she hadn't checked in on us in years. The conversations always ended the same way. Vance quieter than before, distracted, like someone had planted a thought he didn't want to share yet. At dinner one night, barely 2 weeks before my retirement party, he set his fork down and said, "Have you ever thought about what you'd do if you weren't tied down?" I looked up from my plate. "Tied down by what?" "By everything," he said. "By routine, by expectations." I studied his face, the lines around his eyes, the man I'd watched age alongside me. "We built this life together," I said slowly. "It's not a trap." He nodded, but the agreement felt hollow, like he was saying what he knew he should, not what he believed. That night, I noticed he slept turned away from me. Small thing, easy to ignore. But the signs kept stacking. He stopped talking about our future and started talking about his. The trips he wanted to take, the hobbies he'd explore, the version of himself he felt he'd postponed for too long. And somehow in his story, I wasn't a partner. I was a delay. The week of the retirement party, Rachel invited him out for drinks. I knew because he mentioned it too casually, like he was daring me to question it. "You don't mind, right?" he said. "It's just my sister." "I don't mind," I said. But when he came home, he smelled like cheap whiskey and certainty. That night, while he showered, his phone buzzed on the nightstand. I didn't pick it up. I didn't read anything. I didn't need to. The screen lit up with a calendar reminder. Meeting, Diane Foster, 2 p.m. The name didn't mean anything to me then. But something in my chest tightened. "Who's Diane?" I asked later, trying to sound neutral. "A lawyer," he said easily, too easily. "Rachel recommended her, just for advice." "About what?" "About options." Options. I didn't sleep much after that. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, replaying years of moments I'd brushed aside. All the times I'd assumed silence meant peace. All the ways I'd made myself smaller so our marriage wouldn't crack. And for the first time, a question formed that I was afraid to answer. What if Vance wasn't unhappy with life? What if he was unhappy that I'd survived it so well without him? The retirement party came fast after that. Too fast. And when he walked into that conference room with the folder in his hands, I realized something with chilling clarity. He hadn't just planned to leave. He'd planned to make a statement. And he wanted an audience. The moment Vance said the words divorce papers, my body reacted before my mind did. A sharp heat crawled up my spine. My fingers went cold. Somewhere behind me, I heard someone inhale sharply, like the whole room had flinched at once. For a split second, I considered laughing. Not because it was funny, but because it felt unreal, like something happening to someone else. A woman in a story people would gossip about later in the break room. "You're serious," I said, my voice steady in a way that surprised even me. "I am," Vance replied. He held the folder out farther, as if proximity would force my hand. "Everything's already filed. This is just the last step." Blake shifted beside me. I could feel him pretending to look at the table, pretending he wasn't suddenly trapped inside my marriage. I took the folder. The paper was heavy, not physically, emotionally. Months of planning pressed flat into neat black text. Petition for dissolution of marriage. His signature already there. My eyes skimmed the pages faster than they should have, catching phrases instead of sentences. Irreconcilable differences. Spousal support request. Division of marital assets. Every word felt deliberate, sanitized, like our 26 years had been reduced to bullet points. "You did all of this," I said quietly. "Yes. And you thought this was the moment?" He didn't answer. He didn't need to. I could feel it. The phones coming out, the whispers coiling like smoke. The banner behind us, still smiling happy retirement in bold blue letters. I closed the folder slowly. "Do you have a pen?" I asked. That finally caused a flicker in his expression, just a fraction of a second where he hesitated. He reached into his jacket pocket and handed me one. I didn't read the fine print carefully, not because I didn't care, but because I understood something in that moment. This wasn't about negotiation. This was about dignity. So I signed. Every line, every initial. Blue ink bleeding into paper while 25 people stood frozen, watching a marriage end without shouting or tears. When I finished, I closed the folder and handed it back to him. Then I leaned in just enough that only he could hear me. "You have absolutely no idea what you just did to yourself," I said softly. His jaw tightened, but I stepped back before he could respond. I turned to Blake like nothing had happened. "You were saying something about transmission issues?" That's when the clapping started. Slow at first. One pair of hands. Then another. I looked up. Lindsay, my daughter, stood near the entrance, applauding like she'd just watched something brave. Something victorious. Her face was bright with conviction, like she believed she'd chosen the right side of history. Beside her, Derek joined in, grinning, nodding along like this was all exactly how it should be. My chest didn't shatter. It hollowed. Vance took the folder, turned, and walked out. Lindsay and Derek followed him without a word, without a glance back at me. The room stayed silent for a long 10 seconds after the door closed. Then someone cleared their throat. Blake mumbled something about coffee. Life resumed, awkwardly, stiffly, but unmistakably. My supervisor approached me, concern written all over his face. "Marissa, are you okay?" "I'm fine," I said. And to my own surprise, I meant it. I stayed for another hour. I ate a slice of cake with my name on it, shook hands, accepted a plaque engraved with my years of service, smiled for photos that would be framed on office walls long after people forgot the drama attached to them. At 8 o'clock, I drove myself home. Vance's car wasn't in the driveway. His clothes were gone from the closet, his coffee maker, his grandmother's china. But the couch was still there. The bookshelf I'd built with my own hands, the rug we'd bought on a road trip years ago. I sat down in the quiet and let it settle. My phone buzzed, a text from Greg. "Are you okay?" That was intense. "I'm good," I typed back. And I was. Because as I stared at the empty space where Vance used to be, one thought kept circling, calm and clear. He thought he'd planned everything. He hadn't even come close. 3 months. That's all it would take. The first thing people expect after a moment like that is collapse. Crying on the kitchen floor. Rage. A phone thrown against the wall. Some dramatic unraveling that proves the damage landed. None of that happened. The house was quiet in a way that felt unfamiliar but not cruel. No television murmuring in the background. No footsteps pacing from room to room. Just space. Just stillness. I sat on the couch and rested my hands on my knees, noticing small things my mind had never lingered on before. The faint scratch in the wood where Derek once dragged a chair, the way the lamp cast a soft shadow over the bookshelf I'd built myself years ago. The house still felt like mine. Not half mine, not borrowed. Mine. I wasn't numb, I was alert, like every sense had sharpened. I thought about the way Vance had walked into that conference room, the certainty in his posture, the confidence of a man who believed he understood the full shape of the ground beneath his feet. And I asked myself a question I hadn't dared to before. How long has he been preparing to leave? Because divorce papers don't materialize overnight. Lawyers don't draft filings on impulse, and people don't rehearse public humiliation unless they've already justified it to themselves. I stood up and walked through the house. The bedroom closet told the story before my mind caught up. Empty hangers on one side, shoes missing, the dent in the mattress where he used to sleep already beginning to relax back into itself. He'd packed carefully, selectively, like he knew exactly what he was entitled to, which meant he'd been planning this while still eating dinners I cooked, still sleeping under a roof I paid for, still letting me believe we were simply navigating a rough season. That realization didn't break me. It clarified me. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Greg. If you need me, I'm here. I appreciated that, but I didn't call. Because this wasn't a moment for noise. This was a moment for assessment. I poured myself a glass of water and stood at the kitchen counter, replaying the party in my head, not to torture myself, but to study it. Lindsay's applause. Derek's grin. Not the actions of cruel children, the actions of convinced ones. Kids who had been given a version of the story where their mother was the obstacle, not the foundation. I wondered what Vance had told them. That I'd grown cold? That I'd stopped caring? That I'd chosen work over family? The truth was simpler and heavier than that. I had carried the family so long, they mistook my strength for absence. That night, I didn't pour a drink to forget. I didn't scroll through old photos. I didn't draft angry messages I'd regret later. I slept. Not deeply, not peacefully, but I slept. And when I woke up at 6 the next morning, body clock still loyal after 30 years, I didn't feel like a woman abandoned. I felt like a woman standing at the edge of a ledger, ready to balance it. Coffee at 6, breakfast by 7. Routine steadied me. That Tuesday morning, I drove to a different bank branch than usual. Not the one where tellers greeted us by name. Not the one Vance assumed was the center of our financial universe. I sat across from a banker named Sophia, a sharp, composed woman in her early 30s, and told her calmly that I needed to restructure my accounts. She pulled everything up. One joint checking account, one savings account in my name only. I'd like to open a new checking account, I said. Just in my name, and I need to transfer exactly half of the joint account. Sophia looked at me, then at the screen. You're entitled to that, she said. Good. I didn't take more. I didn't take less. I took what was fair. When I walked out with a temporary debit card and a receipt showing my new balance, I didn't feel victorious. I felt grounded. That afternoon, I met with a lawyer. Not flashy, not expensive, just honest. And as I laid the papers out on his desk, I realized something important. Vance thought serving me divorce papers was the end of the story. But for me, it was just the beginning of finally responding. The lawyer's name was Victor Hayes. He wasn't the kind of man who wore tailored suits or spoke in dramatic legal language. His office sat above a pizza place on Market Street, and it smelled like old paper and burnt coffee, like a place where real work happened without ceremony. When I finished explaining everything, he leaned back in his chair and let out a slow breath. He served you divorce papers at your retirement party, Victor said. In front of your coworkers, your family. That's unusually aggressive. It was efficient, I replied. He doesn't like mess. Victor raised an eyebrow, but said nothing as he started reviewing the documents. Page by page, line by line. She's requesting spousal support, he said after a moment. I corrected him automatically. He. Right, he's requesting support, Victor amended. Based on your income history and assets, he's expecting around $2,000 a month. I didn't react. $2,000 a month was a number designed to feel reasonable, manageable, like something I wouldn't fight too hard. That seems high, Victor continued, especially considering he's capable of working full-time. He worked part-time at the boutique until last year, I said. Quit because he said it was draining. Victor hummed and kept reading. Then he stopped. This is interesting, he said, tapping page 7. He's claiming the house is marital property and wants it sold. According to this, he believes there's about $90,000 in equity, and he wants half. I stayed quiet. Victor looked at me over his glasses. Is there something you're not telling me? The house is paid off, I said. I made the final payment 4 months ago. He blinked. Completely? Completely. I withdrew from my retirement account, paid the penalty, and cleared the mortgage. The deed is in my name only. The down payment came from my father's inheritance, and we set it up that way from the start for tax reasons. Victor set the papers down slowly. Does he know this? He knew we were close to paying it off, I said. I don't think he knew I'd already done it. Victor's mouth twitched. So he's operating under the assumption that there's still a mortgage and that both names are on the deed. Yes. Well, Victor said carefully, that changes everything. We spent the next hour laying it all out. The retirement account I'd rolled into a protected IRA the day after the party. The savings account in my name only, $40,000 I'd built quietly over years of discipline. The pickup truck I owned outright because he didn't like driving larger vehicles. Victor took notes, precise and thorough. "He's going to be very surprised," Victor said as he walked me to the door. "That's the idea," I replied. That evening, I cooked dinner for myself. Chicken, rice, steamed vegetables. The same meal I'd eaten for years, because Vance insisted red meat was bad for my cholesterol. Tomorrow I decided I'd buy a steak. My phone rang around 8. It was Lindsay. "Mom, we need to talk." "About what?" "About Dad, about what happened at your party." "There's nothing to talk about," I said. "He wanted a divorce. I signed." "You didn't even try to stop him. Why would I stop someone who wants to leave?" Silence. Then she said, "Derek and I just think you could have handled it differently." "Differently how?" "Mom says you're being cold." I closed my eyes. "He served me divorce papers in public," I said calmly. "And you two applauded. I signed and went home. That's not cold. That's practical." More silence. "I have to go," I said. "Dinner's getting cold." I hung up and didn't apologize for it. That night, I sat on the back porch with a beer. Not the light kind Vance liked. The kind I actually enjoyed, but never kept stocked because he complained it was too heavy. 2 weeks passed. Then 3. Vance's lawyer, Dylan Foster, called. He wanted to speed things up. Said his client was eager to move on. "Let him wait," Victor told me later. "We'll file our response Friday." When the response went out, it was 12 pages long. Every assumption corrected. Every asset documented. Every request answered with facts instead of feelings. And at the end, a counterclaim requesting Vance pay his share of household expenses for the months he'd planned the divorce while living under my roof. Victor called me after filing. "He's going to lose his mind," he said. "Good," I replied, because this wasn't revenge. It was reality finally catching up. The night everything caught up to me didn't arrive with drama. No shouting, no slammed doors, just quiet. It was late. The house hummed the way houses do when they're settling into sleep, pipes ticking softly, the refrigerator clicking on and off. I stood in the kitchen staring at the sink, at a drip I'd been meaning to fix for weeks. Drip, drip, drip. It felt louder than it should have. That's when the weight finally dropped. Not the divorce itself. I had made peace with that faster than anyone expected. It was the realization that my own children had watched their father humiliate me publicly and applauded. I sat down at the table and let my hands fall into my lap. I thought about Lindsay as a little girl, falling asleep on my chest while I stayed up late finishing reports for work. About Derek, small hands gripping my finger the first day of school because he was scared of the noise. I had done everything right. I had shown up. And somehow the story they'd been told made me the villain. That's where the doubt crept in. Not loud, not cruel, just quiet and persistent. Did I fail them? Not as a worker, not as a provider. As a mother. I replayed the years in my head. How often I'd come home tired. How often I'd said later instead of now. How often Vance had been the fun one because I was the responsible one. And for the first time since the party, my chest tightened. Not with anger, with grief. A few days later, I ran into Derek at the hardware store. He stood in the paint aisle staring at color samples like they held answers. We locked eyes. Neither of us smiled. "How have you been?" he asked. "I'm fine," I said. "You?" "Good, yeah, good." He fidgeted with a paint card, then put it back. "About the party," he started. "We didn't think you'd just sign everything." "What did you think I'd do?" I asked. "Fight," he said. "Argue, try to talk Mom out of it." "She served me divorce papers in front of 25 people, I replied. What exactly was there to discuss? He didn't have an answer. He told me what Vance had said, that I'd changed, that I'd stopped caring, that I'd given up on life. "And you believed him," I said. "She's our dad," he said weakly. "And I'm your mother." His face flushed. That conversation followed me home like a shadow. That night, Victor called. "Dylan's filing to challenge the asset division," he said. "They're arguing non-financial contributions, household management, emotional labor." I laughed, a short, humorless sound. "Let them," I said. "I can afford to fight." But after the call ended, I sat on the back porch and stared into the dark. For the first time, I felt tired. Not physically, existentially. I had spent my entire adult life being the solid ground under everyone else's feet, and now, standing alone in a house that was legally mine but emotionally quieter than it had ever been, I felt something close to despair. Not because I was losing, but because winning didn't feel like relief yet. The lowest moment came a week later when Lindsay called, her voice tight. "Mom's having a hard time," she said. "She doesn't have enough money for an apartment. Rachel's husband is getting irritated. She's saying you're being cruel. Cruel. The word hit harder than I expected. After everything, after the public humiliation, the planning, the assumptions, I was the cruel one for not fixing the mess I didn't create. That night, I stood in the bedroom and looked at the empty side of the closet. And for the first time since the divorce papers, I cried. Not for Vance, for the woman I'd been when I thought love meant carrying everything silently. That was the bottom. The place where you finally understand that if you don't change, you will disappear. And in that quiet, tear-soaked moment, something shifted. Not rage. Resolve. If this was going to end, it would end with the truth fully exposed. Not to punish him, but to finally free me. The shift didn't come with a grand gesture. It came with clarity. It was a Tuesday afternoon when Victor called, his voice sharper than usual. "They've filed an emergency motion for temporary support," he said. "Hearing scheduled next week." I was in the middle of replacing the weather stripping on the front door. My hands were dirty, my posture steady. "Am I needed?" I asked. "Yes, I'll be there." That night, I slept better than I had in weeks. Not because I felt safe, but because I finally felt aligned with myself. Before the hearing, I ran into Lindsay for coffee. She sat across from me, gripping a fancy drink she didn't touch, eyes red like she hadn't slept well. She apologized. For clapping. For not asking my side. For assuming. "I didn't know," she said softly. "I really didn't." "I believe you," I replied, and I did. That mattered more than I expected. The hearing lasted 40 minutes. The judge, a woman in her 60s with reading glasses and zero tolerance for theatrics, listened carefully. "Mrs. Castellano," she said, addressing Vance, "you filed for divorce. You served the papers publicly. Is that correct?" "Yes." "And you were aware your wife had recently retired?" "Yes." "You are capable of working full-time?" Silence. Victor presented the evidence. Work history, account transfers, deeds, records, everything Vance hadn't bothered to verify before making demands. The judge didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "Temporary support is denied," she said finally. "The petitioner is capable of employment. Asset division will proceed as filed." She closed the folder. "We're done here." Outside the courthouse, Vance stood on the steps looking smaller than I remembered. Dylan spoke to him in low, urgent tones. I walked past without stopping. Victor caught up with me near my car. "She'll want to settle now," he said. "Good," I replied. 2 weeks later, the settlement offer came. No house, no support, just the remainder of the joint checking, his car, and personal belongings. I accepted. When the divorce was finalized, I didn't attend the final hearing. I didn't need to. That weekend, Lindsay and Derek came by while I was staining the back deck. They didn't say much. They just helped. We worked side by side. Wood, sun, silence. Afterward, I grilled burgers. We ate watching the sky fade from blue to gold. "Mom got an apartment," Derek said. "She got a full-time job." "Good," I replied. Later, after they left, I stood alone in my quiet house. Paid off. Clean. Mine. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was surviving something. I felt like I was choosing myself. And that choice, simple, unglamorous, unwavering, was the real turning point. The aftermath didn't explode. It unraveled. Slowly, quietly, inevitably. Vance stopped being the man with a plan and became the man explaining himself to lawyers, to friends, to anyone who would listen. The confidence he'd worn into that conference room began to crack under the weight of facts he'd never bothered to confirm. People noticed, not in dramatic confrontations, but in subtle shifts, invitations that stopped coming, conversations that ended sooner than expected, the kind of social distance that doesn't announce itself, it just appears. Rachel stopped calling me entirely. From what I heard through Greg, her tone changed too, less triumphant, more defensive. Apparently, she'd been telling anyone who would listen that I was hiding money, manipulating the system, punishing Vance out of spite. But documentation has a way of silencing gossip. Records don't care about narratives. The judge's denial of temporary support traveled faster than I expected. Word spread through the family, through friends, through the quiet network of people who'd attended that retirement party and wondered what happened after the applause faded. The truth had a way of filling the silence. Lindsay and Derek didn't apologize again. They didn't need to. They started showing up. A quick text, a weekend visit, help with small projects around the house. No grand speeches, just presence. And presence, I learned, is the only apology that lasts. Vance, on the other hand, kept fighting longer than he should have. He challenged the house again. Lost. He tried to argue that long-term marriage entitled him to more. It didn't. Each legal failure stripped another layer of certainty from him. The man who'd thought he was stepping into freedom began to realize he'd stepped into responsibility, with no safety net. When he finally accepted the settlement, it wasn't because he understood. It was because he ran out of room to pretend. I never celebrated his losses. I didn't need to. The consequences arrived on their own. He moved into a small apartment across town, took a full-time job he complained about endlessly, started dating someone new, someone who didn't know the history yet. I wished him no harm, but I didn't wish him comfort either. The day the divorce was finalized, I stood in the kitchen and made myself coffee. Black, strong, exactly how I liked it. No one called. No one cried. Life simply continued. And in that continuation, I found something unexpected. Peace. Not the loud kind. The kind that comes from knowing there are no more arguments to win, no more roles to perform, no more versions of yourself to shrink into for someone else's comfort. The house remained quiet, but no longer empty. It felt aligned. Every chair, every wall, every inch paid for by my own labor and discipline. And for the first time in years, nothing in it felt borrowed. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I ran into Rachel at the grocery store. She looked surprised to see me, like she'd expected me to be smaller somehow, sadder, still carrying the wreckage she'd helped imagine. We exchanged polite nods, nothing more. Before we parted, she said almost carefully, "Vance is doing okay. He's dating someone new, works at a tire shop, seems nice enough." "That's good," I replied, and I meant it. Later that evening, standing in my kitchen with the windows open, I thought about how strange healing actually is. It doesn't come with fireworks. It comes quietly, when you realize you're no longer replaying old conversations in your head. When the house feels like shelter instead of a battlefield. When you cook the food you like, drink what you enjoy, and stop explaining your choices to anyone. I thought about that woman at the retirement party, the one holding a pen in her hand while everyone watched. She wasn't weak. She wasn't naive. She was simply done begging to be understood. For years, I believed that love meant endurance, that commitment meant sacrifice without keeping score, that being strong meant absorbing everything quietly, so no one else had to feel uncomfortable. I was wrong. Real strength is knowing when to stop carrying what isn't yours. Vance thought divorce would give him freedom without cost. He thought planning made him powerful. He thought humiliating me publicly would put him in control of the narrative. But life doesn't reward theatrics. It rewards clarity. He made a choice, and then he had to live inside it. As for me, I wake up early, not because I have to, but because I like the quiet mornings. I take care of my home. I see my children finding their way back to me. Not perfectly, not quickly, but honestly. I don't feel victorious. I feel whole. If there's a lesson in all of this, it's not about revenge or winning. It's this. When someone decides to leave your life, let them go. Just don't let them take your truth, your dignity, or the future you worked for with them. Some exits reveal more than entrances ever could. And sometimes the most powerful thing a woman can do is sign the paper, stand up straight, and keep walking.